Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. Co-host is Justin Baker in the studio.
You heard it here, folks.
Yes.
In the Phil Collins.
That's right. I mean, do you know what it means?
I still haven't figured out what that means. I know that Earth, Wind, and Fire was, I don't know if they were just the trumpeter, horn section in that song, or if they legit were part of writing it, but they were there in the music video. So.
They were there in the studio.
And this is the studio.
Okay, so on today's show, we won't unfortunately be talking about music. That's that's for another life, for another podcast.
Other passion.
We actually could do a podcast probably on music.
Yeah,
that would be interesting. But hockey is what we want to talk about. We know that's what you want to hear about. And after a 2-week hiatus, where I feel like I went up north and came back, and then I went up a different north.
A different north.
I look at Lake Huron, and I went all the way up. I went to Lake Michigan, but up to like Traverse City, if you know anything about Michigan, basically to the top of the fingers.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, he's using his hand as a map. So if you're not from Michigan.
And then shoot across the border into Canada the next time and go up north of Toronto. So I made a little V. With my travels.
By the way, I got to ask, did you ever get stuck in any traffic or nonsense with the Raptors championship people?
No, we actually didn't. We went north of Toronto. Like we didn't go through Toronto.
Went around.
Yeah.
Okay.
We took the toll road so we could avoid the city because it is much, much better. Toronto is crazy traffic. So on today's show, we are, of course, as we did our last show, you may have forgotten, since it was 2 weeks ago, we did the bottom 5 teams in the draft, which are technically the top 5 teams here in the draft. Bottom 5 teams in the league. And now we're going to go through 6 through 10, which are the Detroit Red Wings, the Buffalo Sabres, Edmonton Oilers, the Ducks, and the Canucks. So we're going to do those teams. Before we do that, though, there has been some activity throughout the league. And we want to jump in on that, give some analysis and our thoughts on what's going on throughout the league. So let's start with the Jacob Trouba trade, probably the most significant deal made thus far in terms of a trade. Jacob Trouba dealt to the New York Rangers for the 20th overall pick, which was actually Winnipeg's first-round pick. They acquired for Kevin Hayes and Neil Pionk, young defenseman Neil Pionk. Your thoughts on the trade?
First off, just a nice pickup for the Rangers. I mean, basically, they just rented out Hayes for a few months, who they can legit go and re-sign if they want to in New York. I don't think he'll be back, but I mean, that would just be funny to me.
Apparently, that's one of the teams he's considering because he hasn't re-signed with the Flyers.
Right? And granted, I've heard that Philly's made a good impression on him, that he really likes the facilities, yada, 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 but I mean, it's Philly. Come on.
Yeah.
It's Philly.
I mean, it's really not that far from New York anyways, but...
No.
Yeah. Trouba on the Rangers. Now we see this, a Rangers team that had given up everybody, acquired Jacob Trouba. We got to think that a long-term deal is in the wings here. Trouba's kind of been that guy that's been getting these small, shortened deals because the Jets had to sign other guys, and he kept kind of getting pushed further and further down the line, and push comes to shove, no way they're going to be able to sign him to probably what he'll get is somewhere around this, like
7.5, 8.
Yeah. I was going to say just shy of maybe a John Carlson kind of deal.
Yeah.
So the Rangers definitely have the cap space to do it. And I think this signals that the Rangers are not looking to finish in the bottom of the league anymore. Like, they're not trying to tank. They maybe don't necessarily expect they'll make the playoffs, but they feel like they have a group that they can move forward with. And, I got to think it has something to do with Henrik Lundqvist.
Yeah, I mean, I necessarily don't think that, maybe that's why they went out and got Jacob Trouba, because he's still young. He's still 25, and I think, even if you're still in a rebuild mode...
don't you know 25's ancient?
Yes. Yeah, 25 as a D-man, I mean, you still got some decent life left in you, and if they're doing a rebuild, come on, he would be a great piece to add, and he's right-handed shot, which, how many of those pop up in the league? I mean, parents, if you're listening out there, get your kids to play D if they're right-handed, because they will cash in, even if they're halfway decent. So,
right, which is really like someone who's left-handed plays right-handed.
Right.
For the most part.
You could, yeah, sure.
I don't know. I'm right-handed and I play left.
See, I don't. I'm right-handed. I play right. Except
Why
when
did
I'm
you play defense?
I should have, son of a gun.
Damn it.
Anyways, yeah. So good pickup for the Rangers, and then you got to look at it too. I think Ranger fans have to be a little careful here because, granted, yes, they went out, they got a good piece, and they definitely won this trade. However, there's all those rumors now, like, okay, yeah, we're going to probably get Capo Caco or maybe Jack Hughes if by some miracle New Jersey decides not to take him, and then possibly Panarin, and Ranger fans would probably be screaming like, oh, we're going to win the cup now. No, slow down. You still have some work to do, so don't get too excited. There's still a rebuild to go here.
Yeah, I also like Neil Pionk going to Winnipeg. He'll fill in a gap, and I don't think that Winnipeg's done. I got to think that first round pick is in play for them as well. But this is a good draft for getting what you need. I can't remember who it was that I was listening. I think it was Brian Burke said this is a kind of draft where there's so many of each different type of player. A speedy defenseman, a big defenseman, a scoring winger, a setup guy. There's a lot of these different guys at these different sizes, and they kind of all fall within here's your top 5 of these. Choose who you want, choose who you like best. And so we may see teams looking for need. And so a team like Winnipeg, they might go, hey, we know maybe in a year, like we're going to need this guy, especially young players. You think, how many young players are coming into the league at 18, 19, 20? It used to be a first-round pick, especially a guy who, even at like a second or a third, these guys weren't coming in the league for 3-4 years, and then even then, it's all a crapshoot. So now I feel like a lot of teams are taking chances on younger players because it's a lot easier, it's cheaper, and if you can hit a home run or even just come close to having a decent guy come in on the second or third round, there you've got a guy who's making $950,000. He's cost controlled. He's an RFA at the end of it. Doesn't matter. And so I think we're starting to see maybe teams choose need over like, all right, this guy's absolutely better.
Montreal's a perfect example of that too. Last year, Kotkaniemi, I think any other team, any other year, he probably would have been sent down and, hey, go ripen a little bit. But cost control, they had a need at center real bad, and it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, it did work out, I think. And I think sometimes if you have the right players around, a young player can develop at the pro level, and it's not a bad thing. Not everyone has to go and dominate at a lower level to come back up. Like that's not everybody has to do.
Got to build this kid's confidence.
Not everybody needs that. Now some guys, I think you just got to know your players, right? And you got to know who is going to come up and be. If the Canadians had been a really bad team, it would have been a little bit more rough.
Sure.
It also helps. I mean, Kotkaniemi, was he a European prospect, or was he actually playing in the Canadian Hockey League? I can't remember. Because if they're coming from Europe, they can go and be sent to the AHL. Right. But if they're coming from the OHL, it's either go back to the OHL or play in the NHL, which is just the stupidest thing. I don't know why the league puts up with that crap. It's ridiculous. They're the NHL. Just go, no. That's not going to be the agreement anymore. The only reason why you have a league is because of us. Right. Maybe not that. Maybe that's not totally true. But in a lot of markets, I think that it is. People go to see those players. I understand that. But, I mean, just do better. Market your players better, I guess.
I guess.
Teams should have the option. Maybe one player in their organization, they should be able to go, all right, this is our exception player.
Well, juniors has the exception where they can bring in guys before they're 16. Yeah.
So give me an exception player. Like the Leafs with Mitch Marner. The year that he was on London, I mean, obviously it all worked out. Everything's okay. But they should have been able to send him to the Marlies instead of London if they wanted to. Maybe they wouldn't have wanted to. London's not a bad place to play. But I think teams should have the option because I think there are a lot of players where the teams would go, well, yeah, let's like keep him in-house, rather than giving him away to an OHL team where we have no control over who develops him while he's with the team. But how did we get there from the Trouba?
I have no idea.
Okay. Let's go to this Justin Braun deal for the
Niskanen.
We'll kind of lump this in with
Niskanen.
with Matt Niskanen for Radko Gudas. So the Flyers get rid of Gudas and add Niskanen, and they also add Justin Braun from San Jose for a second-round pick in this week's draft and a third in next draft. You can't. To me, Justin Braun replaces Radko Gudas because Niskanen's a totally different player than Gudas.
Yeah, to be quite honest, I'm not sure that Niskanen is going to be that good of a defenseman for the Flyers. I think because he's a righty, I think, they kind of almost like reaching in the draft a little bit. I think they're overextending themselves thinking, hey, this guy's going to be better than he was, even though last year he looked like he was completely slowing down, completely going the other way in terms of his talent.
Apparently he's had some injuries. So
well, maybe that might play a part of it. Sure, absolutely. And I kind of like Radko Gudas. I think he does very well on the penalty kill, and I think he still adds a little bit of grit in there where a lot of teams like to see on defense. Braun, like we talked about, he's a right-handed guy. Right? He's right-handed. I can't remember. Anyways, no, he's a lefty. I'm sorry.
Braun's a lefty.
Yeah. Anyways, Braun has gotten very good last year. He developed much better at killing penalties and playing a 200-foot game. I think originally he was taught it as, an offensive guy, and I think now he's kind of found a niche being more of a Vlasic-type guy behind, Vlasic, playing on the second line with Karlsson. Now, again, I'm not reading into it too much because he was playing with Karlsson pretty much all of last year, which maybe could have inflated his play a little bit more.
Karlsson played what? He played like 60 games or something like that last year? Yeah.
So maybe it made Braun look a little bit better than he actually was. And if that's the case, then, good for San Jose getting what they did out of this pick, needing to shed a little bit of cap room.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I like the move for both teams. Especially, obviously Erik Karlsson signs with the San Jose Sharks. 8-year, $11 million deal. About on
11.5.
11.5, yeah. About on par with what he probably would have gotten in Ottawa. Maybe a little bit less. Taxes are a pinch higher in Silicon Valley, but cost of living pretty low there, I hear, right?
Yeah.
Silicon Valley. I think the average cost for a house is like $1.1 million.
It's like Toronto's market.
That's a crazy housing market.
That's
American money.
Yeah, true.
You think like, okay, you come to like Metro Detroit, the average house is like $190,000 or something like that,
if that.
And the average house there is $1.1 million. That is insane.
Yeah, Google and Apple, they've just killed the market.
You can't find a house for cheaper than like $750,000.
It's worse than I think living in New York, to be quite honest.
Probably.
You find like a 200 square foot apartment for like $1,500 a month.
Bye.
See ya.
Hey, you get this little mouse hole for, that's no thanks. Okay, so I do find this funny. David Clarkson asked to submit a 16-team no trade list because that's what he has. God knows why he'd ever say, nah.
Yeah, who cares who you trade me to?
That. He's on LTIR. He's never playing again. He has a $5.25 million cap. And, of course, the Vegas Golden Knights are trying to trade him. Remember, he was acquired during the expansion draft, and that was how the Vegas Golden Knights got William Karlsson, was because of this
Columbus,
deal.
yeah.
They said, all right, well, we'll take David Clarkson off your hands, and you give us this. Now, it is interesting that they're trying to move him because he can go on LTIR. He doesn't actually cost them anything towards the cap. So I'm thinking here, if Vegas is trying to maybe they're going to be up against the cap. This does signal one thing to me: they can't spend more than the cap. They have some kind of internal cap.
Well, to me, you're kind of on the right track here. What I think, and that's the ability to spend above the cap, right? You're allowed to spend 10%. Is it over the cap? So
10% before the season starts. Yeah,
right,
like in the off season.
And you look at, I've been hearing a lot of talk, especially from Darren Dreger. He's saying that he's heard now, and GMs are apparently freaking out and panicking that the cap's not even going to go up to 83 like it was projected. That apparently it might go 82 or even $1 or $2 less, which would put a lot of teams in a bind because you're thinking that's a good, bottom six guy that you're probably going to lose now in that $1 million.
Right.
So, for a team like Vegas, who right now has the highest cap hit in the league, $0, they're above $83 million right now.
But that space. LTIR,
sure, it'll knock off. But
that to me says they don't, because they still have to pay David Clarkson, even though he's not on a cap hit. They're still paying him.
And
so
maybe
that to me says,
there is.
Well, they don't actually want to pay over the cap.
Sure, because now they're up against the cap.
They don't have the money.
I don't know about that.
I'm thinking no, because even though they're up against the cap, that if a guy's put on LTIR, if they're up against the cap, it goes away.
Right.
And so it doesn't count against the cap. So really, it doesn't really matter.
But in the offseason, though, it still counts towards the cap.
So in the offseason, they can't spend.
Yeah, so you can't spend. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So when you have to re-sign guys like William Karlsson and Thomas Nosek, that extra $8 million you were hoping for, even less now because the projected cap space is going to go down, now you're in a pinch and you don't have the money to spend. So now you have to remove a little bit of that money so that you can spend.
Yeah, who would be willing to... What would you be willing to accept for David Clarkson? Like, what are they going to need to package? Because to me, that's minimum second-round pick.
That much, you think?
Minimum second-round pick. For $5 million bucks?
You know what I would
actually have to pay a guy. So,
right.
So, I mean, let's just go off here. How much are you willing to pay in dollars for a draft pick?
So you know what I would try to do? I would find a team that maybe is looking for a third line center or a third line guy to play some penalty kill minutes or would really like that depth centerman and try to throw in Thomas Nosek with him, right? Say, hey, we'll throw him in. You throw us back maybe a 6th round pick and take Clarkson's contract off our hands, and maybe that might work out. Because Nosek's a great penalty killer. He's got speed. He's still young. He's an RFA, so you don't have to worry about, getting him poached. But so that would be my thought. That's what I would try to do. Or maybe a goalie-hungry team and say, take Malcolm Subban. Maybe he might.
Yeah, but Malcolm Subban's been...
He was terrible last year.
You want to pay $5 million bucks for Malcolm Subban?
Oh, no one's going to pay $5 million.
That's what you're going to have to pay if you take David Clarkson. You got to pay $5 million bucks.
Well, I know. Essentially,
so
yeah, okay, I guess. Essentially.
I'm thinking from an owner's perspective, you go, all right, we can get this guy if we're willing to just give someone $5 million, right? David Clarkson has 1 year left on his deal?
1 year, yeah.
Okay, so $5.25 million. So somebody has to be worth not only whatever they're going to get paid, which Nosek probably going to get somewhere in the 2.5 range.
Maybe, yeah.
And so that means that for Thomas Nosek, essentially, you're going to pay almost $8 million to have him on your team. Is he worth it?
Well, there's not many people. Yeah, I guess
you need to give me a 1st round pick. Ooh. I think to get Clarkson off my hand, I think you need to send your 1st round pick.
That's going to be tough.
That's going to be real tough. I mean, and if I'm some other team, I'll do.
Well, I wouldn't want to help them out because you saw Vegas was quote unquote helping other teams out by taking these players off their hands, and look what they did. So they robbed everybody. So of course they're not going to get robbed again.
I think Columbus is finally like, this is kind of biting me in the ass,
right?
Because that everyone 2 years ago was going, you idiots, you gave up William Karlsson for Josh to keep Josh Anderson, and now he's so much better and scored 40 goals.
Yeah.
How much is William Karlsson kicking himself for not taking a long-term deal, though?
Right.
Oops. I mean, it's not like he's going to get...
He'll still get paid money, but
$3 million or anything. But yeah, he'll still get paid. I mean, if he's smart, he just goes and takes another 1 year deal and then goes to unrestricted free agency, and he probably has a nice little market for himself.
Yeah, centerman, 27.
Second line centerman. He's their first line centerman, sort of, but kind of first line by committee. But,
right.
In terms of the Flyers and Kevin Hayes, do you think he signs with Philadelphia, or do you think he's gone?
I think he tests the market.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, right, this is a year where there's a lack of high-end centermen right now. There's Matt Duchene, and then there's everybody else. And I think if Hayes goes to market, he's right underneath Duchene, and I think he can cash in pretty good. And he gets to pick whatever team he wants to go to. I mean, granted, a lot of the legit Stanley Cup contenders might be up against the cap or a little bit closer, but I think most teams would be willing to find a way to squeeze you in somehow. So why not go there?
Okay. I would agree. There's no reason not to, unless you're going to get an 8-year deal, which is, hey, Karlsson signed with San Jose. You can get that extra year, And of course, when he's
Well, see, now Hayes can't get that 8-year because his rights were acquired after the
right.
deadline.
Right.
So he can only get 7.
But nobody was going to sign him to an 8-year deal anyways.
No, of course not.
He's not that kind of guy. So he's probably looking for something in line with like just under JVR kind of money is my guess. Probably like a 5-year between 6 and 7 million.
Oh, I think he's getting 7 anywhere else in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
It's $7 million for Kevin Hayes. I'm not willing to pay that.
Well, I definitely wouldn't, but I'm like I said, lack of quality centerman. Somebody's going to pay him that money. So
Yeah, and with you also have to remember that there is going to be some kind of CBA renegotiation, whether that's a lockout or not, or if it's some kind of whether that stupid stuff happens. Hopefully, they just figure it out,
right,
and that's what we do. But you got to think that there's going to be some sort of adjustment or something new placed there. So if I'm a player, I'm also thinking, all right, there could be something coming that stops me from getting these longer deals or stops me from getting something. And so you make your deal now.
Get it now. Yeah.
Get it now. Okay, let's head to working through these teams. The Detroit Red Wings. First team on our list. They do have the 6th overall pick for this. Did they have the 5th overall pick last year?
No, they had 6.
They had 6, yeah. So for the second straight
Phillips
year,
Zadina.
they have the 6th overall pick. And maybe not quite as obvious who they should take. I think we had a list of a couple guys that they could take. But as far as I'm seeing in mock drafts, you could probably toss 7-8 players in there, depending on what the Red Wings think. I've never talked to any of these kids. I don't know what they're like. And so the Red Wings, obviously, they have a need for defense. My hunch is that they look hard at a defenseman if there are some available there. That would be where I'd lean if I were the Red Wings. But there's nothing, if you think a kid is far and away way better than anybody else, then you're going to nab him. With the 6th overall pick and then having to, really not much to re-sign. I think, let's start here. Nicholas Kronwall, is he out? Is he done?
No, I think he could re-sign.
Re-sign?
Yeah, I think it'll be like a $1 to $2 million 1-year deal. Yeah, something cheap.
Okay.
Yeah, but why not? Because he's going to spend. I mean, we said it about him this past season. He probably would have, but he didn't. But I would assume that Yzerman's going to be like, hey, dude, we'll give you a couple $1 million. You'll probably spend a quarter of the season in the press box to keep that knee fresh. What do you say?
Yeah.
So if he's willing,
play 50 games.
Yeah.
Just take every other day off. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have him there.
No, I mean, come on. If you could have Kronwall even with a bad knee or take Jonathan Ericsson, I'll take Kronwall all day.
Yeah,
long.
I remember they used to always have Dan Cleary around all the time.
And he turned down that 2-year deal from Philly, and Holland's like, "Oh yeah, we'll give you 2 years, but we got to do it on 1-year contracts." Hated him for that.
Yeah. So a couple of guys that it's going to be first off. Thomas Vanek did come out today and say he is not retiring. He is looking to play next year. I doubt it's with Detroit.
It's not. No, Detroit won't re-sign him.
Yeah.
No, they're not gonna. They're gonna stay away from these older guys. I think Yzerman wants to, anyways, as much as possible, unless they are like a Nick Kronwall, for example. Obviously Detroit's got some moves that they would love to make. I think Yzerman's going to try to work the phones and see if he can unload, maybe one of these ugly contracts, whether that's Franz Nielsen's or, what's his face, Justin Abdelkader, maybe Darren Helm. I don't know. One of those guys would be great,
No
but
one's taking Justin Abdelkader.
I know, but I mean, you would hope that maybe he could con somebody into doing that.
I think he just has a complete no trade clause.
Yeah, he does, but
and so does
Darren Helm. But I mean,
I got to think that those guys would be willing to move if they were able to go somewhere.
Yeah, be like, hey, you can play in the fourth line here, or you can go play maybe more minutes somewhere else,
or at least play on a playoff team,
right?
Which I don't think that the Red Wings are too. Like, if the Red Wings next year were to make a playoff push, it wouldn't shock me, but I still don't think they're there yet. But it all depends on, all right, how does Zadina look next year? Are they able to, maybe a Joseph Veleno? What is he looking like? There's some different options, but defensemen, if they trade either Mike Green, Trevor Daley, I don't think Jonathan Ericsson's going anywhere.
Danny DeKeyser. There would be a contract they'd love to get off the books, and he's still young enough.
Another no-trade clause.
Yeah, I know.
Full no-trade. But, I think with Eriksson, Daly, Green, all UFAs at the end of the year, I think there is some paths to dumping them. I think you probably want to hang on to Green because you don't really have a defenseman like him right now. At least a veteran defenseman who can move the puck.
Yeah, okay, veteran, yes.
I guess Trevor Daly, sort of.
But I think we've seen the development of Philip Vronic, especially in the Worlds. He looked really good on that Czech team, and he looked like he could move the puck, and I think Detroit hopes that maybe he could turn into a pretty good top 4 guy. But Mike Green, on the other hand, too, if you're a Detroit fan, maybe you're looking at the trade deadline and saying, hey, maybe we can find a way to move him. And
I think that's most likely.
Yeah, he could get a good return.
Plus, I mean, if you're looking to improve your team, you got to keep them. But then you look at where you're at the deadline, and that's where you could deal a guy like that. They're going to have some interesting contracts coming up too, because you've got Mantha, Athanasiou, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Evgeny Svechnikov. Who Svechnikov could have a halfway decent season, first round draft pick and brother of Andre. So what are your expectations for a guy like Svechnikov? Maybe a Michael Rasmussen, and then, of course, Philip Zadina, who we did get to see a little glimmer of in the last, 15 games or so of the regular season.
Yeah, a little bit.
Where do you think those guys' development is going? And ultimately, how do you think that impacts the team's performance on the ice and in the win-loss column?
Yeah, I think a guy like Svechnikov, you're going to probably see start the year in the AHL. Probably a guy like Zadina as well, unless they have just a tremendous camp. That is assuming that, most of these contracts, these terrible contracts we talked about, are still coming back. Detroit probably won't have too much roster space for these younger guys. I think a guy like Rasmussen will make his way back onto the team full time this year, just because he is a big net front presence that I think Detroit really enjoyed having last year, because they don't have a lot of guys that play down low in front of the net in those harder areas. But for Svechnikov, I would like to see just a healthy season out of him. Since he's come to Detroit, it's been a lot of injury-plagued seasons, and so you haven't really got to see a full, body of work for 1 year from him. So I think regardless, even though you might have a little higher expectations in terms of point totals for him, to me it's just I want to see him stay healthy for the year and develop that way.
So like a 30-point season would be okay.
Yeah, sure.
30, 35.
Yeah.
To me, Zadina starts up with the team.
I would hope
he would play that good. Yeah. I got to think that he's there. Maybe not playing on the first line or anything, but we'll see where he comes. How he comes back. At this point, any free agents that you're hoping that the Red Wings sign, maybe they're, I got to think that there's something in the works to bring somebody from Tampa Bay, like.
Well, Tyler Johnson, sure, yeah, would be great, but. I honestly don't think they're going to really target any big names at the, at free agency. If you listen to his presser, he talked about, good teams aren't built through free agency. Good teams are built through the draft, and I think Detroit's going to try to find draft picks where they can, unload contracts where they can, and develop young. We've already seen the development of, guys like, Anthony Ciu, work their way up into the lineup, into, more prominent roles now. So, I'm hoping after watching the Worlds too, a guy like Anthony Mantha comes full circle. Now he can start really scoring some goals and sniping them. Dylan Larkin's looked great. He was legit one of those leaders for Team USA right next to Kane. Yeah. So
Dylan Larkin this last year took himself from being like, well, yeah, he's an okay second line guy,
right,
to be like, okay, this guy maybe can. I would put Dylan Larkin probably in the Ryan Johansson. He's definitely a number one.
Sure.
Maybe he's a better scorer than Ryan Johansson.
That's very true. 30 goals for Larkin last year.
Yeah. But in terms of maybe where he's at with the rest of the league's number one centers, he probably is ideally a number two center. But what are you gonna do? And especially if you can put Zadina on his wing, suddenly maybe he's putting up 70 points because he's got this high end sniper of a guy on the right side. So.
And for me, I'm very interested to see at the draft too what the Wings do. Right,
3 second-round picks.
Right, so you could turn that into something, but more or less at number 6, right? Obviously they would love to get a defenseman. What's his face? Bowen Byram would be legit if he falls down to number 6. Detroit would scoop him up in a second. However, I got to think that he'll probably get snagged up by either Chicago or LA before he falls down to Detroit. However, what's even more curious to me is, okay, say Detroit gets to number 6 and Byram's not available. Does Detroit reach and go after a guy by the name of Spencer Knight, who is one of the most highly touted goaltending prospects in the last few years?
Spencer Knight's going to go 6th.
Well, that's the thing. Detroit has nobody in the pipeline to play goalie. So, if you're Yzerman, you're thinking, man, do we reach for this guy and hope he pans out, because he could be the next maybe Marc-Andre Fleury?
I don't think you can do that.
Okay.
I don't see it.
I do think it is a reach at number 6 for sure.
If you had number 20 and he's there.
Well, no, I think he'll go probably between 10 and 15, in my opinion. But
it's just really, you got Carey Price and Roberto Luongo playing in the league, and there's not very many guys who are number 1 guys that were taken in the first round.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury.
Marc-Andre Fleury. Yeah,
it's very true. But again, Detroit, nothing in the pipeline for goaltenders. So
which if you think about it, it's not. I mean, there's 31 starting goaltenders in the league. So why those guys go in the 4th, 3rd, 5th round? They should. I mean, someone should have taken them earlier.
Right. It's very hard to evaluate talent at the goaltending position.
It's hard to evaluate, but if you can figure it out, then it would be worth, like, hey, if you think that he's going to be a legitimate star, then you take him at 6, because he's going to be a legitimate star in your mind. That's so it's hard to evaluate, but I guess if you think he's the guy, then he's the guy, because a goaltender can absolutely change the entire landscape of your franchise. And the Red Wings are really holding on to Jimmy Howard. He's just plugging.
He's that Band-Aid right now.
You're living on a prayer with him, because he had a really nice season last year.
He did.
But can he stay healthy? And can he do it again?
Right.
And unrestricted at the end of the year again, so maybe a possible trade.
Jimmy's going to be that guy over the next couple of years that's going to be floating on 1-year deals till they find somebody to take over. So whether that is through free agency or the draft. So.
And Jonathan Bernier has a good season every 3 years, so maybe he'll get something out of him. Okay, one last question. Where do you think the Red Wings fall when all is said and done at the end of next season?
Oh, boy. You know what? I still think they're outside of the playoffs looking in. I think that they're not in the bottom 3 of the East like they were this year. I think they definitely improve. They showed some moxie at the end of the season. So, but the problem is they, every other team in that division is just getting better. And, you got to think, I would hope that Buffalo's ready to make some strides. Hope so. Toronto, Boston, Tampa, they're still going to be there. Montreal, again, I hope they, I would assume that they're probably right where they were at last year, too.
It's going to be jam-packed in that division.
Yeah, so I don't see them making the playoffs, but I would like to think that they get a little bit better.
I think that they will be, certain players will be better.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the wheels to fall off Franz Nielsen. He's 35.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I don't know how much longer he's going to be an effective second-line center. Maybe this is a year he takes a step back. He's really more of a third-line center.
And Anthony Ciu comes up.
And their defense at this point, does Mike Green still look as good? Can he stay healthy? Because he has struggled with his health. Really his whole career, he's struggled with his health. And then you're going to have maybe Cronwall re-signs, but he's only going to play 60% of the games. And so I think there's a lot of hope. Like, let's say Zadina comes in. If he can score 25 goals, that's something to get excited about. Ultimately, though, the best thing for the Red Wings is to finish towards the bottom of the league. And at trade deadline, if they're not within 3 points of the playoffs, they should sell everyone possible.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Okay, Buffalo Sabres. Speaking of them, let's go to them and their newly signed toy. Jeff Skinner signs an 8-year, $9 million per year deal. They, of course, Jack Eichel rocking the top at $10 million, but a lot of unrestricted free agents on the defensive side. Zach Bogosian, Marco Scandella, Matt Hunwick, Casey Nelson, guys who at the end of this year all gone. Connor Sheary, Scott Wilson, Vladimir Sobotka. So potentially some guys that you can move, because of the list that I just read, the only player that I'm going, man, I'd really like to hang on to that guy, is Connor Sheary. And I'm willing to get rid of all the rest of those guys. But the Buffalo Sabres do have the 7th overall pick, which is...
They're going to get a good player.
Could do something with that. And, I mean, really, it's just... Is this team going to take that step with guys like Alex Nylander and Tage Thompson? Are these guys going to be able to actually make an impact at the NHL level? Because if they don't, I mean, they still, when you look at this team and you go, all right, how much better is this team now than they were, at the beginning of the season last year? And it's almost like they're worse. Well, they had such a good start.
They did. Yeah.
And after that, I mean, take them or take the St. Louis Blues. They basically had opposite seasons. The Buffalo Sabres were tops in the East at one point.
Yes, they were.
And meanwhile, the Blues are last, and then they take off, and the
flip-flop them,
and the Sabres crash. And so it's just I really don't like this collection of players. I mean, of course, Jack Eichel, it's not his fault, but there just seems to be something wrong. And I like that they signed Jeff Skinner because Jack Eichel played so well with him, but there isn't a whole lot to like outside of maybe like a Sam Reinhart and Casey Middlestat. I don't love a lot. I mean, forward-wise. Of course, defenseman, all right, Rasmus Dahlin, he can make a big difference. Is this the time to maybe look at actually trading Rasmus Ristolainen?
Well, I will say this. I have heard his name floated out there, and it's a little bit hard to sell a guy who, during his tenure in Buffalo, granted, I've been an advocate of not reading into it too much, but when the number's this large, over his career in Buffalo, 6 years, it's a minus 143. That's hard to sell to any team. Ooh. Like, hey guys, we got this guy. He's 20.
We got this guy. He's not good.
just sell the right-handed shot defenseman, right? And the fact that he's 24. So, and if he pans out, great. $5.4 million a season is a steal for a top 4 defenseman who's right-handed. But I would expect Buffalo to make a lot of moves. One, because yes, I'm with you. I don't think they really look any better than they were at the end of the season. And to be quite honest, when the wheels fell off, that's not the team you're hoping to get next year. So you have to do something, right? It ended up costing them a head coach, and they brought in Mr. Kruger here. But for me, Jason Botterill, this is his last chance, right? This is his last season. They have to make a splash. They have to make the playoffs, in my opinion, or he's going to be gone. So for me, this is a team that it would not shock me to see them make some big trades to sign a big free agent defenseman, because right now I think they have projected around $20 million.
Tyler Myers. They could bring him back.
You could bring him back. Absolutely. You could bring him back and get rid of Ristolainen. I think Tyler Myers would be much better in a top role. Yeah, playing alongside Dahlin, that would be fantastic for the both of them. This could be even a team where like a guy like, Gustav Nyquist could go in and play some good second line minutes for the squad. But who knows? Right now they've got Skinner, Eichel, and Reinhart on that top line. But after that, maybe, like you said, Connor Sheary's the one guy I like. And then after that, I'm kind of like, iffy on everybody else. So Casey Middlestat, right? You could move him. You could probably get a pretty decent return.
He's the one guy that I want to keep. I don't think they're dealing a young center. But Jake Gardner is a guy I would target if I were Buffalo.
Ooh.
I do think that, assuming the Leafs are able to deal Zaitsev, I think that Gardner will stay.
Sure. But why wouldn't you want to stay on a team that's probably going to be a contender?
If I'm Buffalo, it's not far from Toronto. You don't have to. It's you're in terms of how far you're traveling for other things. You're not changing a whole lot.
$7 million, maybe.
He's an American. You give him, maybe you push him a little bit, and you give him 7.5, and if you're playing him with Dahlin,
it's not too shabby.
Okay, let's go to the Edmonton Oilers, who have just been a treat to watch over the last 10 years.
Treat is a good word for it.
As a Red Wings fan, you got to be happy about what's happened to them since they beat the Red Wings in the first round when the Wings finished tops in the league, won the President's Trophy, and the Oilers beat them in 7 games. Right. And ever since then, the Oilers have missed the playoffs, other than 1 year when they went to the second round, right?
Right, second round.
All right,
lost to the Ducks.
Yeah, and have been pretty bad. So I feel like we're basically looking at the same team we were looking at last year. The difference is that they don't have what's the best word to use to describe their former general manager? Maybe it's just, a guy who isn't asleep at the wheel, or was he drunk at the wheel? I'm not sure. Not sure which one. Either way, he crashed the freaking car. The car is on fire on the side of the highway, and there are children trapped in the back.
Children!
And the firefighters are here to use those jaws of death. Or life.
Jaws of life.
Yeah. Yes. No, they aren't trying to crush the kids.
Death.
They do have, obviously they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but for all the talk about, can they get rid of Milan Lucic's contract? I don't even care. Let's go ahead. Let's write that off. Let's assume that at this point you have $76 million in cap space. And that's that. I would tell Milan Lucic, go home. You're not playing here. Go orchestrate yourself a trade. That's the only way you're ever going to play in the NHL again. I would rather pay him to do absolutely nothing and stay at home than be on my team. That is how bad he is to me. I would rather bring up any young player, put him in his place. Don't care if he's good for the locker room or not. He's no good. He's way too big. Unless he comes back to camp weighing 20,
well, you know what I would
pounds
do?
Lighter.
That might motivate him a little bit. You put him on freaking waivers.
No, you can't. He has a no move.
Does he really?
He has a no move clause.
What the frick?
Yep. And that was. I'm going. Hey, you are not. He's not even a guy who I would let sit in the press box. I say, we're very sorry, but you cannot play, and you have every right to go out and find yourself a deal. But goodbye, good riddance. You have been absolutely garbage and the worst signing in the last 10 years outside of David Clarkson.
Wow.
But at least David Clarkson is willing to go, I'm hurt, I'll sit out. He's not actually really costing the team any cap hit if they don't need it. Whereas Milan Lucic is just completely useless.
Yeah.
If somebody's willing to take him, I'll hang on to $3 million.
I am interested to see what Dave Tippett does because I love this head coach signing a lot. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, God, Dave Tippett, he's a big defensive guy, and they don't play defense very well, right? Well, let's be honest. The more and more I've read into it a little bit more, and I watched or listened to an interview with Dave Tippett, he's like, I'm not a defensive guy. I just do with what I have, right? So Arizona, a lot of the guys couldn't score goals there, so what did he do? He just tried to play defense and it worked out pretty good for him for a long time. So same with, Oilers, right? Outside of Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, right? They can't score goals. So maybe he gets some of these guys to buy into playing a little bit more defense, or maybe they actually go out and make some trades. I don't know. I will say after watching Kenny Holland orchestrate that trade where he got Dadzuk's contract sent to Arizona and only moved down a couple spots, like freaking A, he could still probably pull something off in this world. So who knows? So to me, maybe Lucci gets moved at some point. I doubt it. But
all the other horrible.
Okay, yeah, we won't talk about that because there were a lot of freaking bad deals. So I do think Holland has learned his lesson. I don't think he'll be giving out these Lucci type deals again. But I am interested to see what Dave Tippett does do with Milan Lucic if he lets him play, if he puts him on the fourth line,
they're going to have him play. But that's just not what I would do.
We know what you would do.
Goodbye. Okay, and in terms of where the Oilers finish next season, I think it's almost so premature to say anything because I think they're going to try and be active in free agency. Despite, really, they have about $10, maybe $9 million in cap space, and you're maybe hoping. Right now they have 8 defensemen that all have one-way contracts. So, 7 with one-way, making at least $1.9 million. So they have quite a few guys. They could move a Brandon Manning. Darnell Nurse needs a new contract for next year.
Yep.
He'll be eligible to sign an extension on July 1st.
Try to get someone to take Chris Russell. There's a right-handed defenseman where teams might be able to say, hey, you know what? we'll take a chance on him.
A lesser, maybe a team that has a lot of cap space.
Right.
And he could come in and play a 5-6 role. And,
I know he's got a modified no trade clause. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but
he submits a 10-team trade list, and next year he submits a 15 trade list. So they actually, yes, they do have both of their ability to hang on to some salary. So, but I think you try and do everything you can for Milan Lucic. Send him back to Boston. We'd love to see him, says Toronto. Okay, well let's move on to the Ducks, who were, they looked okay early on. They were giving up a lot of shots. John Gibson was a maniac in net, and it finally all fell apart. But they do have San Jose's first round pick, and they have their own picking at number 9, and it's Corey Perry, and I feel like he maybe has played his last game as a Duck. I think there's a chance. Despite having a no move clause, I think there's a chance they buy him out.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're going to try over the next week to try to trade him somewhere, even if it's like, hey, we'll eat half the salary.
I think there's no doubt you have to eat half.
Yeah,
you'd have to eat half.
Absolutely. So they're going to try to find somebody to take him, and I think that's going to be very, very difficult. I think you're going to have to convince him too to say, hey, listen, we got an opportunity to trade you. We're gonna do it. Just please go, or else, like you said, they're going to buy him out, and I think they probably would, because there's no reason to keep that salary on the book. They got to create. I think they'll probably get around like $5-ish million in cap relief for this season. Yeah. So,
I think if I'm Corey Perry, I say, go ahead, buy me out, then I can sign wherever I want.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, unless you can convince him to go on LTIR and retire.
Well, there's that too, but I don't think that's happening.
In terms of the rest of this team, there's actually a lot to like about this team. I don't really think that this is all right, this team is just falling apart. I think there's a lot of money wrapped up in Perry. I think Getzlaf is still a good centerman.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt he's still a number one centerman. It just, he needs to stay healthy. The one, I guess, the back end outside of Fowler, Lindholm, and Josh Manson, it's a little thin. At this point, they only have 5 defensemen signed. 4 defensemen signed. The other is Brendan Gould. And so Anaheim is going to be looking for a defenseman. And I got to think that, maybe you're looking from within. Perhaps they're looking to deal, but I think you're probably looking to sign some mid-level free agents to kind of fill in that back end. But I'm wondering, does this team go, all right, we have Ryan Getzlaf. How much longer is he going to be really effective? We maybe have 1 or 2 more years left of him being really effective. Is this a team that takes a shot at a bigger free agent? Maybe they're, Artemi Panarin. Nobody's talked about Panarin to Anaheim. They don't really have the cap space unless they move somebody. But if they bought out Corey Perry, they would have the cap space to bring in Artemi Panarin. And Panarin wants to play by the ocean.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to go there.
Wouldn't be a bad place to play next to Ryan Getzlaf.
No, it wouldn't be a bad place. But I think, you want to look at a team that, to be quite honest, they've got their window, but it's only because of Ryan Getzlaf, right? So they have to.
But their window. Hampus Lindholm and Cam Fowler are
they've good pieces.
The Ducks have very underrated top end of their defense.
Right, good pieces there, great piece in that. But I think if you're looking at other teams, right, like Florida or the New York Rangers, for example,
Who's
right?
Florida going to get in that?
Well, they go get Bobrovsky. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah, but is that going to happen? Are they going to get Bobrovsky and Panarin?
They can. They could swing that. They'd have to move Hoffman out, but they could swing it.
And then you've got 2 guys making more than $10 million.
Well,
as a winger.
That's the market.
Yeah, Anaheim also has some decent guys coming up through their system.
They do. Sam Steele, Mac Jones. They got some good players, but you know what? Like we talked about, I think their window is small here for Getzlaf. They got 1-2 years left, and then I think after that they're going to probably put him on 1-2 2-year deals at most at a couple million bucks.
Pull the Thorntons
and do that. So, but yeah, they do have some good young pieces. I think they just have to continue to develop younger guys because, these contracts of Kessler and Perry and Getzlaf are kind of holding them back a little bit at this point where they can move forward. So, I shouldn't say Getzlaf, but.
Now, I know Kessler he had another surgery.
Right.
I wonder if Anaheim is going, all right, we're definitely putting him on LTIR, like at least for a little while he recovers from the surgery. Does he come back? Or if he does come back, if he's no good, he's immediately going on LTIR. They're going to determine, well, he's too injured to play, or his hip is garbage, and so put him on LTIR, and you get that $685, basically $7 million in relief, and you're good to go. Which that allows you to do quite a bit.
Yeah, then you can make a deal, but...
Yeah, I do wonder if this team, maybe they look at what they have and they go, all right, well, we can deal Patrick Eaves. We can kind of maybe do a little bit of a refresh here. Maybe you deal a guy like Jakob Silverberg or Adam Henrique, who you can...
Well, I don't think Henrique's going anywhere. They just re-signed him, so...
Yeah. But, I mean, there's got to be somebody maybe who moves out. I mean, your top end's your top end. Unless you're bringing in somebody new, you're going to have the same exact top end, and it's just not going to.
I think this is a team I think this is a team that's going to wait on guys like Sam Steele and Max Jones to develop.
But how good are they really going to be?
Well, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. They could be top 6 guys, but whether they're top line guys is a whole other story.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the Vancouver Canucks to close out the show. Basically, a team completely opposite positioning as Anaheim. They finished very close in the standings. Vancouver on their way up and up and up, and we see probably a pretty tall ceiling for this team, whereas Anaheim we're a little unsure on. And so Vancouver is a really fun team to kind of take a look at. They do have an Alex Edler who's unrestricted, wanted to be in Edmonton, wouldn't waive his no trade at the deadline, and kind of hearing some different reports. They're not doing well in their negotiation. Maybe Edler goes somewhere else. I think ultimately he signs some kind of 2 or 3 year deal with Vancouver and he takes a discount to stay there. But it really, the forward position for this team it's pretty nice. I mean, Bo Horvat centering your second line, and then Elias Pettersson. I always want to say Elias Pettersson, but it's Elias Pettersson centering your top line. I mean, they've got some nice pieces along with
Brock Besser.
Brock Besser. Oh, he's down there. Brock Besser, and they have some nice players up top. They basically went out in free agency and bought a third line, Jay Beagle, and they scooped up Josh Levo on waivers, who's looked pretty good for them. They pick up Tanner Pearson at the deadline. There's a lot of nice things that they've done to kind of build their depth, and they look pretty decent. But when you look at that defense is kind of just a jumbled lot of guys, and I don't see I mean, of course, they're going to look to free agency. Everyone, if somebody's willing to come there, they're going to take a look at them. But Vancouver has guys coming. They have Quentin Hughes, brother of Jack Hughes. He's going to be real good. I think there's a chance we see him this year, along with Olli Levy, who is supposed to be kind of their next coming of a really good defenseman. Plus Jet Wu, who is my favorite.
Jet Wu, yeah.
Jet Wu. So there's a lot of guys that are there. It's just a matter of who's going to take, and when it comes to Vancouver, they're not going to win unless their defense is able to carry them a little better than they did last year.
That's very true. Yeah, I will say, like we talked about, they got the good young pieces, but I do think a guy like Edler would be great to have back there just for that veteran leadership, because there are a lot of young guys coming up. And if they can't snag him, they need to look to free agency to bring in a big piece. Now, I don't think they're going to go out and, Vancouver's not really a place right now where if I'm a big name defenseman, I'm going to say, oh gosh, I got to go there. That's, got to go there. But
right.
Obviously, I think they're going to have to make a deal somewhere. They could look to a Carolina, maybe a team that, because typically teams at the draft, they like to trade to the other conference, so they don't have to see those guys as much. But maybe you look at that team and say, hey, we need one of your righties. What do you want for him?
I'll tell you who would be a great acquisition if he doesn't re-sign in Toronto is Ron Hainsey.
Interesting.
Hainsey comes in. He has been, numbers-wise, he obviously carried by Morgan Riley, but he is a guy who you could place with a younger defenseman, and he will teach. He does really well in that role. He's a real veteran guy. I think especially if Edler doesn't sign, I think he'd be worth bringing in on like a 1-year, $3 million deal, where you can have that stabilizing presence. You don't even have to play him every night. He's just going to be a good guy to have in your locker room. If he comes on a short-term deal, he could be a good developer for a Quentin Hughes. I mean, put him with Quentin Hughes on that third pairing, or even on the third.
I'm
pairing.
giving Quentin Hughes some top 4 minutes if he's going to play on my team next year, or I'm sending him back down basically. So
well, if you send him back down, then doesn't he have to? Then he has to go to the minors.
Yeah,
right?
I think he does.
He has to go to the Canadian Hockey League.
Does he really?
Right?
I don't know. What? Anyway, another guy I really like too. I mean, I like the idea of Ron Hainsey. I don't think that's the best fit in my opinion. To me, I look at a guy. If you can get Edler back, right, sign him on a 2-3 year deal. A guy I really like, a fellow countryman by the name of Anton Stralman. I think a right-handed defenseman, 32. He's a great penalty killer.
Definitely
still has
going to
feet.
cost a little more.
Right. Might cost a couple more bucks, but I think on a 2 or 3 year contract, I think would be a good stopgap to allow these younger guys to develop and to provide some veteran leadership.
Would you sign Stralman for 4 years?
Not at all.
Because someone's going to give him 4.
If someone gives them 4, they're nuts.
They're going to give him
I would
4.
not. Absolutely not.
I think someone will give him 4. I mean, if you go 3 by 5 or 4 by 4.5.
I mean, he made 4.5 last year, right? He's not going to get that type of money
he's
again.
He's going to get 4.5 again at least.
I think you got to give him 3 and 3.
Still a top 4 defenseman in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, but 3 and 3 is what I would give this guy, and I wouldn't give him any more than that.
Well, and I understand that's what you would do. Someone is going to give him far more than that.
Right, just like someone gave Lucic $6 million a season.
Yes, that is true. Just like someone gave, Kyle Okposo, $6 million for 7 years.
Good grief.
Good job, Buffalo. Vancouver, where do you think they finish next year? You think they're in the playoff hunt? I mean,
I think they're in the hunt
for like a month.
Yeah, I think they'll pretty much be around that bubble for a while. But I do think, again, they look at the teams around them, San Jose, Vegas. I think, even Edmonton might make a little bit more of a push depending on what they do in the offseason. But ultimately, I think this team finishes somewhere, towards the top half of the bottom of the West.
Yeah, depending on what they do defensively.
Yeah.
And goaltending is also another.
I like their goaltending, to be quite honest. Markstrom looked pretty good last year. He wasn't great, but he was good enough.
Nah.
And Demko Thatcher, I got to say.
Demko?
Yeah. Sorry. I got to say, he actually looks like he could be a legit guy. So
Yeah,
I'm
and they
hoping
always have Michael DiPietro down in the minors.
They got some good goaltending.
If they can get good goal, if they got average goaltending,
which
I think
they will.
I think they're a playoff team. If they get average goaltending, actually, I think this team could be the surprise team of next year. I
still think Arizona is that team, but again,
Elias Pettersson,
he could be legit.
Be even better.
Yeah,
maybe he puts on like a pound, and then he'll. He won't get hurt as much. That'd be great too.
Won't get body slammed.
The other thing is that this team, the reason this team kind of dropped was like Bo Horvat got hurt, Pettersson got hurt, and a lot of their top end guys got injured early in the year when they were in the playoff position, and then they really dumped out, and that's when they kind of fell, and they ended up finishing, in the bottom 4 of the West,
something like that.
So I do think they have a shot if they can.
Maybe this would be a good fit for a guy like Wayne Simmons to play a top line role, with Besser and Pettersson. And
I think
so.
I think because of what Patrick Maroon was able to do in the playoffs,
right?
I think that he's. Although I think it'll probably be more like playoff teams are willing to give him a certain type of deal,
a little bit
bring
more.
him in.
Sure,
but we'll see. Okay, well that's the next 5. I mean, the entry draft is but 3 days away.
It's coming.
It is coming. And I'll be watching. We'll be tweeting. We'll be talking all through the summer. We don't go anywhere. That is, that's our thing. When all the other shows go away for the summer, we keep going. So if you're looking for a hockey podcasts, if friends are telling you all my shows are going away for the summer, point them to Overtime Hockey Talk, and we'll see you guys on Twitter. We'll talk to you guys soon.